Each year, I perform over 10,000 voiceover sessions, and I've been doing that for over a decade and a half, so there's a lot of my voice out there. Mostly you hear me in television promos, radio station imaging with some commercials and video game work and other things. The stuff I'm most proud of are what these 2 awards are for movie trailer voiceover acting. When I was just a little kid, I got my very first taste of broadcasting at the age of 10 and 11 years old, doing a fundraiser to help raise money for eyesight research called the Swim for Sight, and I got to go on a radio station called WBZ with a host named Dave Maynard. A few years later, my voice changed and people started telling me like, oh, you might have a good voice for radio. That could be something you might want to check out and try and go into. So a few years later when I got to college, that was one of the first things I did. I went and got an internship at a radio station that some of the people who used to work at WBZ were at, and I was very quickly interested in trying to get into the production side of things as well as voiceovers. I had no idea where to start, even how to begin getting into the business. So 18 years old, my freshman year of college, I just decided I'll call the best guy in the business and ask him for advice. The best guy in the business, of course, in 1995 was Don LaFontaine. He was the #1 movie trailer guy. He's the guy everybody thinks of when you hear the phrase, in a world.
In a world where both of our cars were totally underwater.
Now, at this point, the internet barely even existed, so I couldn't exactly just look up his phone number or anything, so I started grabbing some industry literature and found out that Don was with an agency out in LA called the Tischerman Agency. So I call 411, get the phone number for the Tischerman Agency, asked to speak to his agent and tell him at this point, I'm an 18-year-old kid interested in getting into voice acting and I'd like to speak to Don. Like, is he going to call me back? No way, right? I had no training. I hadn't done any voice acting. It's not like I'd been at it for years and was looking for some advice. I was just some kid, fast-talking, nasally speaking, bad accent kid. I was Peter from Boston. I wanted to become a voice actor. That's how I sounded. At this point, I was in my freshman dorm and had one phone number split with 2 other guys and didn't really think it would be a reliable phone number to give, so I gave out the main contact studio number for the radio station that I was interning at and told Don's agent that he could call me back anytime in the evening because I was interning there every evening. 3 days later, I'm doing my thing in one of the production studios, and the producer of a show called Two Chicks Dishing comes running into the room. His name is Paul, and he's like, hey, you won't believe who's on the phone for you. Don LaFontaine. So Paul transfers Don LaFontaine back to me, and I answer the phone. He's like, hi, is this Peter? You know, that big iconic voice of Don LaFontaine's, and I'm like, yeah. I didn't actually expect him to call me back. I had no plan. I didn't have any questions lined up. I was just kind of maybe thinking that he might call me, and if he did, I'd just ask some general questions, but I was totally unprepared. One of the first things he says to me is like, do you listen to me on TBS a lot? I guess he was the voice of TBS back then, and I'm like, no, I don't have TV in my dorm. And I could tell he was like, great. I had been watching Xena for a long time, though, and he was the voice intro for Xena.
Her courage will change the world.
He, of course, did tons of movie trailers that I'd seen. I was very, very familiar with his work, but I felt really bad that I didn't know his stuff from TBS off the bat. But basically, he's like, what do you want to do? I want to get into voice acting. And he tells me, listen, I'm in the back of my limo right now, and I can give you lessons when I'm going home at the end of the day if you're willing to do it. And I'm like, willing? Absolutely. One of the first things he says to me after talking a little bit about what the heck I wanted to do in the business, and I had no idea, so all my answers were terrible, but basically kind of starts talking about the Pledge of Allegiance and how it's a really emotional script. And I'm like, I guess. I'm an 18-year-old kid. I've never had any acting training. I'm not really into any of this stuff. And he starts going on about how if I can read the Pledge of Allegiance to the point that it starts making me tear up and maybe even start to cry, if I really feel those emotions, then I'm doing it right. If I'm feeling no emotions reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm doing it totally wrong. At this point, I'm like, I don't know, maybe this guy's too woo-woo, too LA for me, like crying in the middle of the Pledge of Allegiance. It just sounded bizarre to me. But I'm listening to him and I promise him I'll start reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and trying to make myself cry. But mostly I was just enamored with the sound and tone and quality of his voice. I asked him if he smoked, if he thought I should take up smoking. He said, do not take up smoking, by the way, even in 1995. I was like trying to ask him how to get my voice deeper, because back then, 18 years old, I'd just gone through puberty a few years earlier. My voice wasn't fully finished changing. It changed over time and has gotten deeper over time. But he kept trying to tell me, like, that's not important. That's not the big thing. Remember what I said about the Pledge of Allegiance? I kept asking questions about, how do I sound like this? And he kept talking about acting and feeling and emotions. I remember during one of the lessons, he was telling me that it was harder for young voice actors to really perform at a high level because they just didn't have the breadth of human experience and wide range of emotions that older people have experienced over their life to put into their reads. And I was like, what? I'm 18 years old, and I'm thinking I already know everything. I've had a lot of experience. I'm 18. A lot of the stuff he was saying to me just wasn't resonating. I was like, why do I have to have suffered a horrible thing in my life to pretend to read copy with a lot of emotion? I can fake that. And to a degree, yes, great actors can fake a lot of emotions, but over a long period of time, I started to realize that Don was right. Pulling from emotional experience and putting it into your read was exactly what he was talking about, and I was terrible at it when I was a teenager. My whole thing when I was doing voice acting at that point, when I was trying to do auditions and trying to get into radio, I was trying to do a lot of rock radio stations, and I would just grab my biggest, angriest rock voice and be like, Rock 101, the rock of the North, just trying to growl out the voiceovers. And he told me again and again and again, it's not about that. It's about taking what someone wrote and conveying that emotion and trying to make your listener feel that. I don't know why I was so dumb or obstinate. People had told me for years that I had this big voice, ever since it changed. And I thought all I needed was the big voice. I didn't really start making any headway in voice acting for about another 12 to 15 years. Lots of training, lots of rejection, lots and lots of rejection. I had to start from the beginning, getting rid of my Boston accent. I was very nasal at the time. I had to stop that. I spoke way too fast all the time and obviously had no actual emotional well to draw from. So my first decade of voice acting, I got some of those, growling rock things, some sports radio stations I was doing work for, but I was not doing well as an actor. As a voice actor, I was a voice, no actor. So Don and I had our first conversation in 1995. It wasn't until 2011 that I started getting some opportunities to try and do some auditions for movie trailers. I was starting to move up in the world, and I was getting some kicks at the bucket for movie trailers. For 4 years, doing movie trailer voice acting, I got nowhere because not only was I just trying to rely on the voice, but I was also trying to sound like everybody else that was in the business, all the top trailer guys. I was basically just trying to do imitations of them. I had the key to what I needed to do in my head that Don had told me so many years earlier, and I just couldn't turn it and unlock it. It wasn't until 2015 that I actually landed my very first movie trailer. It was SpongeBob, Sponge Out of Water.
When their world is in chaos, two legendary heroes will save the day.
Are you talking to me?
My stomach makes noises when it's hungry.
Now that one was obviously kind of a bigger voice thing, but I was starting to get it. I was starting to understand that it wasn't about imitating someone else. It wasn't just having the biggest timbre and tone and deepness quality to my voice. I really started acting. 2018, 23 years after I spoke to Don, over 2 decades after I spoke to the guy, I actually won the award for Outstanding Movie Trailer Voiceover of the Year, and it was for the film. It wasn't a very big film, but it was a huge award for me. It was for the film Uncle Drew.
Throughout time, our greatest legends have passed on words of wisdom.
Oh, my nuts.
Oh, Joe Nuts.
Now, when my name got called and I won that award, I totally did not expect it at all. I just went to the event to be at the event, and I was happy to be in the running. When Banana walked me down to the stage because they'd called my name and I had to give some sort of a speech, I was not prepared, so I talked a little bit about my experience of being a blind guy in the entertainment business, but then quickly started talking about Don and how he had taught me all those years ago and how amazingly and overwhelmingly incredible the feeling was that in 1995, the movie trailer guy was giving me direction. It took me 23 years to figure it out, but finally came full circle as I was winning an award for Outstanding Movie Trailer Voiceover of the Year. It was an amazing night. I won the award again 2 years later. It was 2020, so we were celebrating it at home, unfortunately. I won Outstanding Movie Trailer Voiceover of the Year for the film Unhinged, and then I also won Outstanding Television Promo of the Year for the TV show Archer 1999.
Archer 1999 premieres Wednesday, May 29th on FXX.
Now, Don unfortunately had passed in 2008, which was before I'd even booked my first movie trailer and well before I'd won the awards. But I started thinking about him more and more and more as everything he said started to click later in my life, that you really do have to draw from an emotional well and not focus on your... I'd spend so much time and energy trying to do things with my voice, and it wasn't about that. One of the movie trailers I'm most proud of is a Sir Anthony Hopkins film called One Life that was set around the Holocaust and was something that did not require me to push my voice. It required me to get into the film, into the story, and just tell the story with some emotion.
The true story behind the moment that amazed the world. One Life is a story of radical bravery.
We are working to evacuate these children.
One of Anthony Hopkins' best performances.
You ever think about the children and what happened to them?
Stirring, a testament to the power of good.
Save one life, save the world.
One Life, only in theaters March 15th.
I'm so glad and so thankful and so surprised that Don took my phone call and called me back. He had a little phone in his limo, and he let me call him, or he would call me whenever I felt like I needed a tune-up or just some help. And I wasn't even working yet. I wasn't even close to working, but he was just happy to walk me through an art form that he obviously loved so much. So my huge thanks to him, and encouragement to anybody else out there if you're trying to share some advice and doesn't seem like someone's getting it. Might take a couple decades, but hopefully it'll get through.